Welcome to exhibition. And hello, Joanna Logue.
Hi, Richard. It's delightful to be here. It's my absolute pleasure.
Well, it is lovely to see you there. And of course, you are halfway across the world. You are there in the US, off the coast of Maine. And we'll come to a little about your location very, very shortly. But your exhibition is Alone on the Marsh at Scott Livesey Galleries in Melbourne. And yes, first of all, tell us where you are. You've been in the US for a number of years now, but where are you located?
Okay, we are in Maine on an island off the coast, and it's way up almost near Canada. And we live at the foothills of Arcadia National Park, and I walk I hike in that park most days, actually. And it's been a great inspiration to me.
Can you give us a little bit of a sense of what sort of environment it is? Because certainly very different to the Australian environment that you have been familiar with for so many years.
Well, firstly, it's very cold and there's snow for like 5 months of the year. So that's been really different for me. Just trying to understand how to describe that through paint. But it's really lots of glacial pools and ponds and granite and high mountains.
You mentioned some of those pools, and of course pools feature very strongly in your work and certainly in the works in this exhibition. So actually let's go to some of those physical places which feature in the works in the exhibition, and maybe you can tell us a little about those places as I mentioned them. Soames Pond, where's that?
That's just up the road from my house. I ride my push bike up there, and it is absolutely exquisite. It's in the fall. It is surrounded by beautiful maples that reflect, that mirror into the pond. And I have made quite a few paintings about the pond in the fall, but then having said that, in the winter, I actually sled on the pond, skate on the pond, and cross-country ski on the pond. And so I've made some quite interesting paintings about how the landscape comes down to the edge of the pond in the winter. And of course, snow changes everything because of the positive and negative shapes that it throws out and the contrast.
To another place, Breakneck Creek.
Okay, so this is a hike that I do through one of my favorite places called Witch Hole, which I've made a lot of paintings about. But Breakneck Creek, we call it our beaver walk because you go down past lots of ponds with these beaver lodges, and sometimes you can see the beavers on dusk having their dinner and making renovations to their lodges. And Breakneck Creek is at the bottom of a big ravine, and I actually fell in the creek over winter at minus 10 degrees, and my hiking boots filled up with frozen water. But when I got home, I thought, I'm going to paint this place. And I looked up on the topographic map to see what the name of the place was, because I do like to always call my paintings by the actual place. And it was called Breakneck Creek. And so I'm like, hello, of course it is. But I was lucky to get out of there, you know, because it's dangerous. These winter hikes are dangerous, and you have to be very careful and prepared.
You mentioned Witch Hole a little while ago, and as you say, you've painted a number of works of Witch Hole, but that does sound like a slightly dark and dangerous spot.
Well, it's actually really enchanting and mysterious, and kind of like there's a feeling that something bad has happened here. But I just love it. It's really very visually textured, and lots of lily pads that reflect the sky, and then conifers that are quite gnarly and have fallen down. And so there's this sort of web of sort of visual structure that you look through to the wider field, and big pools of water, and then mountains in the distance. And I just love it. It's a very complicated landscape, but I have been painting it for 4 years now, and I'm quite obsessed.
And in a final introduction to the landscape around you, another specific place, Tangle Pond.
Okay, so this is a little marsh just up the road from my house that most people here wouldn't know about, but I stumbled across it, and it actually doesn't even have a name, so I've called it Tangle Pond, because it is so tangled, and even to get my way in there to make a little drawing is tricky. But once I'm in there, it's like a weaving. So you've got these bulrushes in the foreground and these birches on the other side of the pond, white birches, very straight. And so you've got that lovely veiling. And we all know that Joanna Logue is interested in veiling because it sort of veils the middle ground, the pool, and it makes for a very kinetic, complicated landscape, but a lovely way into abstraction. And also, Richard, in these marshes during the fall, there's a lot of colour. And you know how hard it was for me to work out how to paint that bloody landscape? Because at home, the landscape is quite tertiary and soft and almost hard to work out distance, you know, and there's not a lot of contrast to my mind. Whereas here you've got water, reflected surfaces, things in the foreground, background, and then a lot of colour like magenta, reds, oranges. Like I actually had to go out and buy a whole new palette. Cadmium red, cadmium orange, lemon yellow, you know, and then work out how to paint this thing. And I've actually been struggling with it for 3 years, and it was over the time of lockdown that I actually really worked it out.
You mentioned veiling as something for which you have been very much known and associated with. And yet in many ways, this body of work seems often to be more precisely defined. It's crackling with detail and precise marks. Is that a move you're very conscious to have made?
What happened was I decided, well, I'm going to go all out, and I'm going to do the New York Studio School Drawing Marathon with Fran O'Neill. And what that meant was 6 days of pure immersion into the landscape and drawing in a really immediate way, and really using observation through to abstraction. And my drawing skills became really honed. And I think that's what you're seeing, what's coming out in this exhibition, that confidence of that sort of emphatic mark making. Whereas once upon a time I would have got my big concrete trowel and wiped all that out and sort of veiled it and made it more like a glimpse or a memory. But now I'm learning that no, it's okay to make the mark and leave it there because it's really descriptive.
And does it feel to you as though that's partly because you're observation has become more precise, or just that the response to that observation, the type of mark that you're making through those drawing skills, has changed?
It's both. It's the response to my environment, because it is a very, when I look at this landscape, it is about drawing. It's very drawerly, you know, with the birches and the textures and the dappled light. And so what it's about is finding abstraction through pure observation, because when you're really looking, as we know as artists, what happens is life throws up really interesting surprises. And if you're obedient to making that mark or putting that in your picture, it sits you up. It may not work, but it's a little something that gives the painting an edge, and then you can find pathways and passages, and so this was one of the good things that happened during lockdown.
And so take us with you into the landscape and give us an idea of how you actually draw or paint or produce small gouache works.
I just keep a little kit in the back of the car and pull up, and sometimes it's so cold, if you're painting a snow scene, which I never thought I was ever going to be doing, I just do it in the car using the steering wheel as my, but and you know, and the pallette's all set up, and you just need a little bit of water, as you know, with gouache, and I just make it really quick.
I know that you've got little gouaches nearby, and I wondered if you could share some of those as examples of what you're doing, and just talk us through that a little.
So this is a little gouache I made of witch hole, just down there, just sitting on a granite rock.
Yes.
It's just one visit, Richard, you know. But on this island, there's these amazing shapes that come down to the water. So they are, how do we describe these big granite island shapes that come down to this kind of organic water? That's all this movement, but then you've got this very solid shape. But when we first came to Mount Desert Island, we moved into our house, it was March, and it was minus 17 degrees, and it was snowing. And I thought, holy hell, I was so excited that I sat at our living room window, because of course my studio hadn't been built. I'd left all my paints at home in Oberon in my studio, everything set up, because I was so scared about the idea of coming here, but wanting to at the same time. All I had was my gouaches. So I spent 3 months just painting pictures out of the windows of the snow.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. And so learning how to describe a new environment can be a really steep learning curve as well. For me, I engage with this landscape in a really intellectual way, not a heart way. I engage with the Australian landscape in a heart way. And the heart can sometimes get in the way.
So are you saying that maybe there is just a little greater clarity of vision in the way you're responding to your local landscape there?
Absolutely, because it's all about description, and it's all about trying to understand my place in the world now. And I've enjoyed that, and I've learned a lot. It's not romantic in any way. It's just hard work. And through that, I've actually arrived at something that I've always wanted to arrive at, and that is getting rid of the horizon line, for starters. Because when you're deep in those marshes, there's no horizon line. It's like, maybe that's why Elizabeth Cummings loves to paint those those billabongs, do you know? And it's all that activity. Um,
but also what you're inviting the viewer to do with these works is be completely immersed. And I'm thinking in particular some of the very long, large panoramas. Give us a sense of that decision to paint such a panoramic view.
Well, it's just how I see the world, because I walk in there and then I scan my eye across this pond or this marsh, and there's so much going on that I just want to continue painting it. I suppose it's like a Chinese scroll, but just inverted. Do you know?
Yes.
It tells a story, and where do we stop with this story?
And you mentioned your studio a little while ago. Give us a sense of that space and how you work in your studio space.
Basically, it's in the woods at the back of our house. It's my first purpose-built space, all skylit, concrete floor, all insulated, one big window at one end and a mezzanine at the other, which is my office, which I very rarely get to for my admin. And I go to it every day. I adore my studio, and I go to it not just to work, but to read, to think, stretch my canvases.
You've mentioned water and various ponds and creeks quite a lot in our discussions. What for you is the attraction of water and the surface of water?
What water means is there's a lot of echo. So I say visual echo. So if you have, a bright red maple tree here on a pond, you're going to get that lovely mirroring. And I love that repetition of shape and color, and just the dappled surfaces and the crisscrossing. You've got birches here, and then all these lily pads that are reflecting the sky here, and then the bulrushes. And yeah, so it is, as I said before, very complicated.
You mentioned going out and looking really hard at the landscape, but you have written that over this time of lockdown, there was a lot of challenge and difficulty, both personally and in terms of the broader community where you live and work. And you questioned the value of landscape and landscape painting. But do you feel that you've answered that question and that it has become clear for you now?
Definitely. And for the whole year of lockdown, I was so distressed about what was happening in the world, and so feeling privileged for having the situation, or being in the situation I'm in, relatively protected from all that, living in this beautiful environment. We lost 500,000 people in this country. There was a lot of political unrest and divisiveness. And I was thinking I should be saying more with my work. I need to be more proactive. I need to be more political. What does this all mean? It's facile. This is self-indulgent. All I'm worried about is getting this bloody painting right. Color, tone, structure, composition. It doesn't have enough weight. But then, once I was thinking about writing my statement for the show, I started to think about it in a new way, and it was that actually the landscape saved me. Nature saved me. I was out in it every day. Nature became just so profoundly important. And I felt so much gratitude that I could go out into it every day. And it was very internal for me. at home in Australia, it was very external. It says, oh, wow, I love this so much. It's so beautiful. It's my heartland. But for me here, with all the chaos and uncertainty, it was deeper than that. It was a healing experience and a spiritual experience.
Well, that sense of intensity and environmental importance in the detail and the observation and the love for that detail of the environment is something which shines through in this exhibition. So, Joanna Logue, thank you very much for sharing your exhibition with us.
Thank you, Richard. And I see my show as a kind of memorialization of the lockdown period. And so I celebrate that too. Thank you, Richard.